This guy, who looks like a South African John Cusack with an Aussie cowboy hat, is the film director Richard Stanley. Depending on who you ask, he's either an artistic genius, an insane man who belongs in an asylum, or a foolish weirdo who was ruined by his own success. Maybe all three. And today, we're going to talk about his first feature film, the stylish cyberpunk robot slasher Hardware. I've been meaning to talk about this one for a while now, and it was suggested by Patreon member John Burrell ages ago. He even bought me my DVD copy. So, John, this one's for you.
Once forgotten in the minefields of the Zone, the head of a population control cyborg known as the Mark 13 has found its way into the apartment of Jill, a drug-addled artist who paints on a canvas of scrap metal with a brush made of acetylene. With newfound access to the materials it needs to rebuild itself, the Mark 13 slowly crawls back to life with only one imperative in mind: kill.
In film terms, onirism refers to the idea that films have a dream-like quality and can be interpreted the way a psychoanalyst would interpret dreams. Given that Richard Stanley is a firm believer in onirism, it is therefore fitting that Hardware was born out of a dream the director had as a young boy in his native South Africa. After he began making short Super 8 films when he was 14, this dream, which was about a man searching a windswept post-apocalyptic desert, inspired Stanley to create an entire fictional world around the post-apocalypse, first exemplified by the award-winning Incidents in an Expanding Universe.
That winter, the winds were colder and lonelier than I had ever known them to be before.
Within a year of completing it, Stanley, fearing the draft, fled to London, where he worked on a handful of music videos and spent a lot of time in the Scala Cinema, a notorious theater that specialized in so-called subversive films. And when I say he spent a lot of time there, I mean he often slept there overnight, after watching movies from the likes of Lucio Fulci and a young Sam Raimi. He wrote several screenplays during this time, including the one that would become Hardware, before trekking to Afghanistan to film the documentary Voice of the Moon about the closing days of the Soviet-Afghan War. Meanwhile, the founder of Scala Cinema, Stephen Woolley, had also created Palace Pictures, a small film studio that not only distributed a lot of big American films in the UK, but also strove to nurture young, edgy filmmakers, especially those working in horror. While Stanley was away, Woolley first encountered the fledgling script for Hardware, which he considered perfect for his studio's mission statement. He then purchased the rights from Wicked Films, despite the fact that Wicked Films didn't actually own them. In order to legitimize the sale then, Wicked went into a mad scramble to track down Richard Stanley, only finding him upon his return from the Middle East. Stanley, then 22, began reworking the script, which was originally a much larger and more ambitious story. Inspired by Harry Harrison's Make Room, Roger Zelazny's Damnation Alley, and Walter Miller's A Canticle for Leibowitz, alongside films like John Cardis's Kingdom of the Spiders, Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2, and Andrei Tarkovsky's Stalker, Stanley distilled the essence of his idea into a simplified story about a killer cyborg. Despite this, the projected budget was much too high for Palace Pictures, and no other British film company was interested in funding a science fiction film and potential video nasty. Therefore, Palace turned to the American distribution company Miramax Films, with which Palace had a good working relationship. Miramax, then under the stewardship of the Weinsteins, agreed to help produce the film under the company's Millimeter Films subdivision, on the condition that the lead actors be American rather than British. This led to a significant change to the script, which was originally set in London, and caused further changes to the characters. The primary lead, Jill, is played by Stacey Travis, an actress who had been in a handful of comedies like Earth Girls or Easy. Stanley's only condition upon casting her was that she dye her blonde hair red. She also did her own stunts. For this scene, she even did it without a safety harness, and Stanley had fought so hard for her to get the part that he had a lot less power in regards to the rest of the cast. The male lead, Mo, for example, is played by Dylan McDermott. Stanley's dream casting, if the part had to be played by an American, had been Bill Paxton, and McDermott's entry into the film required changes to the character as written, since Mo was supposed to be more of a loser, more disfigured and chronically unemployed. Still, Stanley warmed up to McDermott in the end, and it was McDermott, an avid Bible reader at the time, who noticed the quote from Mark chapter 13 that starts the film.
The earth will shake, rattle, and roll. The masses will go hungry, their bellies bloat. These are the birth pains. No flesh shall be spared.
The cyborg had already been named Mark 13. According to Stanley, he named it 13 just because it's an unlucky number, so McDermott's discovery was just a happy coincidence. The character of Shades comes from Stanley's other works, including Incidents in an Expanding Universe, in which he is played by Stanley's friend Anton Beebe, on whom the character is partially based. In Hardware, Shades is played by the BAFTA award-winning John Lynch, who I can't help but think is doing his best Richard Stanley impersonation.
Dying in space is real easy. One and your gas spread out over 1,000 miles of stratosphere. Jesus, man, think of the view!
Another character from Stanley's extended universe is the crazed dictator Ernesto Bulgakov, seen in little more than a cameo as played by Chris McCallum. The security chief is played by Oscar James, who gets the most grotesque death in the entire movie. The part of Alvy went to Mark Northover, who filmed all his scenes in one day. Richard Stanley has a vocal cameo as the talking elevator.
Going up.
This place is going to hell.
And Porkins himself, William Hootkins, plays the creepy incel neighbor Lincoln Weinberg.
We all wear wibbly-wobbly ties, and we look at all the pretty girls with wibbly-wobbly eyes.
Due to Stanley's connections with the music industry, a few small roles were given to musicians like Field of the Nephilim's Carl McCoy, who plays the Zone Tripper. The voice of the radio announcer that opens and closes the film was supposed to be Johnny Rotten, aka John Lydon, of Sex Pistols and Public Image Limited fame. A quick side note, the Public Image Limited song The Order of Death was played a lot by Stanley while viewing The Rushes, and as a result, wound up becoming Hardware's main theme. Unfortunately, Lydon had to drop out of the movie at the last minute, so the producer, Joanne Seller, a fellow music video veteran, got in touch with the great Iggy Pop, with whom she had worked on the music video for Cold Metal. Iggy Pop literally phoned in his performance.
This is Angry Bob coming at you loud and clear on WAR radio, somewhere on your dial, and I'm gonna wake you up!
Lastly, there was the boat taxi driver. The role was originally given to none other than Sinead O'Connor, but due to scheduling issues, she was replaced by Lemmy from Motorhead, who reportedly did the part in exchange for putting the Ace of Spades on the soundtrack, and for a bottle of Jack Daniels that he drank before filming. Oh, and there's also an appearance from the band Gwar, though you'll notice that the music playing over them is actually Stigmata by Ministry. Filming began in mid-September 1989 and was done mostly in reverse order. The budget ran dry late in the 6-week shoot, and a lot of sequences in the early parts of the script, including Alvy's elaborate death scene, had to be abandoned. The entire thing was done on a 24-hour-a-day schedule with rotating units, and Richard Stanley spent almost all of his time on set, never bothering to go home to sleep or shower. The vast majority of the effects were done in camera to save both time and money. Stanley had originally planned to use stop-motion animation for the Mark 13 cyborg, but he had to abandon that idea in favor of a full-scale practical model, which was designed to roughly resemble a spider, replete with venomous fangs. The creation of the machine was overseen by Paul Catling, who designed it to not use any servos whatsoever, relying entirely on power drill parts and human intervention for its movement. It did break down frequently, and whenever it wasn't being filmed, it was being repaired or partially rebuilt. One scene that almost the entire crew refused to work on was the attempted, SA scene. Thanks, YouTube. So Stanley himself got behind the camera with just one or two others around to operate the machine, which, in case you can't tell, has a large, erect power drill coming out of its nether regions.
This video is getting so demonetized. Hey, join my Patreon.
Stacey Travis, for her part, thought the scene was absolutely appropriate, and highlights her character's rage-fueled robot beatdown at the end of the movie. Meanwhile, the computer graphics were done by high school students. Stanley likes to say the average age of the crew was around 16, but that's probably an exaggeration. Most of the movie was shot in what was then called Roundhouse Studios in Camden, which was a disused railway shed that had been turned into an art house concert venue before being repurposed as a place to make movies. The production team utilized a lot of the club lighting that was still available in the space, with Stanley insisting on the use of deep color, a technique he borrowed from the Italian horror icons Dario Argento and Mario Bava. Unfortunately, there was no way to fully block out the sound of the busy streets outside, so most of the dialogue in the movie had to be re-recorded in post. I can sympathize with that because it's lawn mowing season right now, but I digress. Roundhouse Studios also wasn't large enough to accommodate things like a three-dimensional backdrop outside the apartment windows, so they used a lot of forced perspective mats and models, which limited camera movement in the interiors, leading to the heavy use of static camera angles and frenetic MTV-style editing. Some locations were also used, including Wales, West Ham and Canning Town in London, and, most notably, the Moroccan desert. They managed to film the opening sequence there, but as they set up to film a complicated dream sequence where Jill unearths the corpse of Mo in a sandy minefield of the zone, the entire area was hit by a freak storm, forcing them to cut the scene entirely. The score was composed by Simon Boswell, who Stanley had come to appreciate from his work on the Italian slasher Stage Fright. Boswell does an incredible job riffing on the main theme song, along with other ancillary songs on the soundtrack, including Ace of Spades. Originally trained on the guitar, he uses a lot of electric guitar to great effect. I should also mention the sound design, done by the acclaimed Jonathan Miller, which, with its heavy reliance on industrial noise and tone-setting ambience, is so good that I highly recommend watching the movie with full surround sound, or at least with a good set of headphones. The film did go through a few revisions in the editing room. There was a oneer that was mercilessly cut, which I'll talk about later, and a few visual references to the Holocaust that had to be removed. On top of that, much of the sex and violence was also trimmed, even more so for the American cut, given that the MPAA originally gave the film the dreaded X rating, but luckily, modern editions of the film, including the one I own, have a lot of the nasty stuff put back in. Hardware released in September of 1990, and got mostly negative reviews that complained it was too derivative of Alien and The Terminator. It released the following month in the UK, where it underperformed to the tune of £300,000 against its £1 million budget, which was about $1.5 million US. However, in spite of this, audiences really took to it in the United States, resulting in a surprising box office haul of $5.7 million. While not an enormous hit, it was enough to become an instant cult classic, and it led to critical re-evaluation of Richard Stanley as an interesting young talent with a colorful future ahead of him, eventually resulting in Hollywood giving him the chance to direct his own version of The Island of Dr. Moreau, which I'll probably talk about later this year. Stay tuned. At some point, the British publisher Fleetway Productions let it be known that the plot of Stanley's script was eerily similar to a one-off comic in the Judge Dredd annual from 1981 called Shock, which is about a woman being stalked in her high-rise apartment by a killer robot. A settlement was reached in which a based-on credit was attributed to writers Steve McManus and Kevin O'Neill in the film's future releases, and while I admit there are some compelling visual similarities, I don't think there was any plagiarism involved here. Hardware was made with the intent to make a sequel with Jill and Shades and a more fully formed cyborg. Stanley even wrote a script, but he has never really gotten the chance to make it, though he still talks about it from time to time. Rights issues made Hardware a difficult find on home video for many years, though it's widely available now. Do you know what else is available now? Tug merch! That's right, I finally opened up a merch store on Redbubble, so go there now if you want to board the tugboat or shamelessly promote me to all your unwitting friends and family. I've got lots of new designs in the pipeline, so check it all out. Anyway, Hardware is a film I highly recommend to fans of edgy, low-budget auteur cinema. It has a stylish, manic energy to it, especially in the second half, where it combines horror and quirky humor like a great slasher flick that dabbles with black comedy.
Wow, what's that?
There's a droid running crazy in my lounge.
That's okay, we can go to my place.
Meanwhile, the first half of the movie has an indie cyberpunk feel to it, which helps make the whole thing come across as less predictable and more interesting than a mere creature feature. It's also an inverted action movie, with a muscle-bound American hero failing to save the damsel in distress and dying rather unceremoniously 2/3 of the way through. Instead, the damsel, a half-wasted drug addict struggling to find hope in a hopeless world, turns herself into a hardened final girl that defeats the monster in the end, albeit partially by accident. I will also note that, hey, just like Die Hard, it's a Christmas movie.
Merry Christmas.
Not only does it take place around the holiday, but it also features religious overtones, including a main character named Moses who likes to quote scripture. However, Stanley's intent wasn't to offer any kind of meaningful commentary on Christianity. Instead, Hardware is about complacency. Stanley grew up under South African apartheid, and upon moving to London, he could see the rising of the surveillance state with almost no pushback from the people. The universe of Hardware is one where everyone has become numb to the broken state of things, where they are issued drugs by the state to stay docile while the government hatches a plan to cull the population. This is where that Wunner cut is so painful to the core message of the film. The scene in question involves Mo and Shades walking to the apartment complex. At one point, they walk past an old man getting violently beaten by hoodlumed children, which the characters casually ignore. This was designed to show how inured even our supposed heroes have become to senseless violence, which is again highlighted by the other big editing loss, the Holocaust footage that was supposed to be intertwined with the sex scene. The idea, while I admit using the Holocaust is a bit much, is that Jill, mid-coitus, is not really paying attention to the act itself, but is watching a Holocaust documentary on TV. That's the kind of commentary Stanley was aiming for, but which the editors hid away beneath the subtext. Nevertheless, Stanley still managed to create an anti-authoritarian cyberpunk film with one foot planted firmly in Italian slasher cinema. I'll grant it's not for everyone, but I personally love it. It's definitely a sci-fi classic. And that's all for today, my fellow Earthlings. What's your favorite killer robot? Let me know in the comments, and while you're there, don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons. Thank you for watching, and until next time, when we'll go ape with the timeline, this is the Unapologetic Geek, telling you to never be ashamed of what you love. As long as you're not hurting anybody.
Keep talking so I know where you are.
I'm right here.